Okay, let's start with a question. How many of us went to business school when we started up in business?
I expect there won't be a particularly large show of hands.
No, and that's because most of us decided to go into business just doing something that we love, or maybe something that we're really good at doing.
It's usually a little way down the line that we start to reflect on not actually gaining a grounding in the useful things like sales, marketing, finance and operations.
Yeah, and that's when it all starts to feel, well, a bit difficult.
I'm Nicky. I've been running businesses since 2004, and I'm the founder of the Growth Community, which is a place where businesses come to network and support each other's business success.
And I'm James, and I started my business back in 2020, helping businesses, brands and organisations to unlock the power of podcasting, basically using audio as a way to market and grow their business.
Well, in our line of work, we both meet a lot of businesses and we're constantly learning new things from being around them. Every day literally is a business school day.
So we thought, why not grab some of this good stuff and turn it into a podcast? So please take your seats. Class is about to start. Hello class, welcome back to Every Day is a Business School Day. Nicky, this is your episode.
It is my episode.
Where are you taking us on this journey of discovery today?
Well, I thought one of the things that's most important of all when you are in a networking meeting is actually being able to introduce yourself in a way that is actually practical and useful. So today we're going to talk about pitching in a networking meeting.
Pitching. Not bitching, pitching.
Not bitching. Well, yeah, I don't know, you could, but no, probably not.
I want to start with a really fundamental thing. I don't really like the word pitch.
Me neither.
I think it sounds very salesy. I think of like you go to pitch to a prospective client and that is like they've invited you, you've got a 20-minute slot and they expect a presentation and a handout and a follow-up email, and that's quite clinical. Pitching in the context that we're talking about it today, which is basically networking meeting, and you know, we go around the room, everyone has 30 seconds, 60 seconds, 2 minutes, whatever it is, and they've got to introduce themselves.
So I think that is exactly it. It's an introduction. And actually we use that language at the Growth Community a lot. We do talk a lot about that. I think that pitching is kind of an inherent thing that everyone talks about in the networking industry. So sometimes I think it's important to use words that people understand, but also I think it's really important to, you know, maybe actually question your understanding of those words as well, because you're right. You know, I think when you use the word pitch, then it does go with sales, and networking is not a sales activity. Networking is a marketing activity. And if you go networking with your lead gen head on, quite often it doesn't really get you anywhere, because unless you're really lucky that you happen to walk into a room where somebody has literally got their credit card out ready to buy your services, generally that isn't why you are out networking, and you know, that's just a lucky break. And so I think when you put your marketing head on and not your lead gen head, you will get much more from networking, albeit it's a long game and you do have to play the long game, but it's a really sustainable way to grow your business, particularly if you're a small business. It is the most sustainable way to grow your business, and it's the most, well, it's affordable, and you know, it's a really easy way to grow your business and fun actually. So I think when you see it that way, it makes much more sense. So yes, we're using the word pitch because people understand that, but actually this is your introduction, essentially.
I think, I kind of feel like the world of business has changed in the last few years, and therefore networking has changed in the last few years. Even like the mindset of how you might go into networking, the different options, the different types of networking groups. I think there probably are some where people, it's all right just to turn up with the intention of just kind of like just trying to sell to the room. There's some that are very much designed around that, and I kind of think, you know, speed networking events and things like that tend to be quite clinical. Obviously, you know, we're here with kind of growth community heads on, where you use the phrase long game. Building connection, isn't it? It's doing it I would say the right way, but I also think the most rewarding way when you someone that you've got to know through networking reaches out to you, it might be a year after you last spoke to them and said, I spoke to someone the other day, mentioned your name because they're looking to do such and such, I'll put you in touch. That feels really rewarding because it's not just like a very clinical lead magnet on a website, and that's not me knocking those things, but there is something really rewarding about it.
And I think it's like anything, having been in marketing for over 30 years, we, were brought up with the concept of the marketing mix, which I'm not sure gets talked about as much these days. But the marketing mix was always that you had a number of different marketing channels that you were working on that complement each other. And you do need some more lead generation related channels, because you can't rely on networking alone. Well, you can, but it takes a while to deliver. If you need business now, then obviously you've got to use a number of different channels. Networking slots into that marketing mix. It's a really foundational activity to do, and it really supports all the other activities. It's just there, somewhere where you go, where you can enjoy being around people, you're making connections, you're making friendships, and those friendships will, as you say, keep giving for a long time to come, provided you keep yourself out there, they know where you are, and they can see that you're still doing a great job of what you do, that, they will still keep coming for many years to come if that's what you want it to do. So it is just about, mixing those things together and, and doing a number of different types of marketing channels. But networking is a long game, but it's fun and it's enjoyable, and it gives you so much more than just some new leads. It gives you friendships, it gives you knowledge, you share experiences, you get new suppliers, you get ideas, and you get personal development out of it. So, networking is more than just a lead generation activity. So I think when you go into a networking room, like a structured networking or a speed networking even, the ultimate goal of being there is to instigate further conversation with other people in that room. That is the whole reason for being there. It is to go into a room, identify some people who you would like to have an onward conversation with, and you just need to be seen enough that people in the room go, oh, she sounds interesting. I'd like to have another conversation with her and see where it goes. Yep. So the pitch or introduction or whatever we're going to call it is essential to get right, and to not just rock up and just say whatever comes out of your head, because this is your key to the next conversation. So it's something.
First impression, isn't it?
Yeah.
And it's, there used to be the advert for, I think it was a deodorant that used to be, you never get a second chance to make a first impression. But the thing is, everyone that we meet at networking, at some point we've met them for the first time. Me and you met for the first time once upon a time.
Yeah.
And we must have whatever that conversation, and I can't remember when it was. I think it was back in COVID days, so it's probably online.
It was.
But, I think you decide within the first few seconds of chatting to someone, either, ooh, or, And whether or not I think this is someone that I'd like to get to know better, or I'm not sure that this is someone for me. And that can change. I'm not saying it's fixed forever, but, it really is first impression. I get quite frustrated at people that do a really bad job of a pitch, and particularly when if you've already had 10 people that have done theirs and done a good job, and then you go to the next person who says, "Oh, I've not really prepared anything, so I've not got anything to say." I'm like, "But you just listen to 10 people do it. Like that's not good enough." It really does matter, and we've got to tread this really delicate balance, haven't we, of how prepared we are, but not wanting to sound like we are just very scripted and boring. And actually, there's a massive crossover between preparing a podcast episode and preparing a pitch, because you just sit and read something, you sound very boring in a podcast. It's got to be off the cuff. It's got to be real. It's got to be engaging. It's got to be conversational. And a pitch is kind of the same, but on steroids, because you've got a minute or you've got 30 seconds. I want to start this by asking you, and this will sound really negative, but I think it's a really good way of getting this conversation flowing. What are the common things that you think people get wrong when it comes to a pitch?
Well, as you said, preparation is important. And one of the things I talk about a lot with in Growth Community Induction is that when you are out being, promoting your business, you are your business's shop front. So, most of us don't have a shop front. We don't have a physical building at all. We are our shop front. So people believe what they see. So if you look prepared, that's a really good tick in the box to start with, isn't it? If you don't look prepared and you don't look like you know why you're there or what you're doing, then that's the first impression I get of you. And I don't know you yet, and I don't know, you might be amazing in your business, I don't know, but I don't know that about you, and I've never seen you do any work. So the first thing I see of you is that really, I you know, are you prepared? Now, there's a difference between being prepared and nervous. You know, it's nerve-wracking doing a 1 minute pitch, and some people, you know, some people never get over that, you know, and that's okay. Being nervous is something that most people are completely cool with. You know, they're all right with that because you can still come across as yourself in that environment. So you can still deliver this, and you can still talk from the heart about what you believe in and how you help people. And it doesn't matter if you're nervous, because we'll still see you. If you just turn up and just don't seem to have a clue why you're there, and you know you can't talk about yourself, then actually initially we're just going to switch off. So, you know, preparation's really important.
Nail on the head.
I think the other thing is, at this point, you know, I've never met you, don't know anything about you. So really, do I need to know all about your services? Not really, because I don't know anything about you at the moment. I don't know what you're like. So telling me how you help people is the easiest way to do this, because I see you, I see what you care about, I see what you do to help people. That's much more interesting to me at the moment, because I'm more interested in learning about you as a human. I'm not really buying from you anything. I'm not interested in your business at the moment. I certainly don't need to know the full list of your services at this point, because quite frankly, it's going to go over my head and it's probably a waste of a minute, especially if you're in a big room. If you're in a room that's got 30 or 40 people in it doing a 30-second or 1 minute pitch, then a list of services is just, unless I am desperate for that service, I'm not even going to have a clue what you just said. It's just going to go whoosh over my head. Not interesting. So you need to stand out. You've got to do something that, you know, particularly if you've been sitting there listening to half an hour's worth of 1 minute pitches and everyone's starting to zone out a bit, as you naturally do, you've got to stand out enough for me to put my head up and go, oh, okay, what are you saying? So I think, I think being prepared and being clear on what you're supposed to be doing in this, it's an introduction, it's an opportunity to be seen, and an opportunity, you know, a very short opportunity to be able to tell us what you stand for, who you are, and what you do to help people. Enough for me to want to go, oh, actually, I'm kind of interested in knowing a bit more about that.
Yep. Yeah,
that's all you can do in that time. And so I think it's a combination, really. You know, you will, you know, a lot of people will be nervous. You know, a lot of people don't like speaking in public, even if it's only for a minute around a table.
Yeah, I hate it.
I do. I hate it.
I find it terrifying. The growth community Sheffield group, which I'm a member of, less so, because, you know, they're people that you get to know and you feel quite confident in that room.
Yeah.
But, you know, if I a group or somewhere that I've not been before, yeah, I still find it terrifying. And that's fine, isn't it? As we've touched on, it's all right to be really nervous about it. It's all right to be really worried about it. And it's all right to kind of show that a little bit, because people aren't going to judge you on that. I think it's better to show a little bit of vulnerability than it is to use your pitch just to say, I'm really good at what I do. And you go, well, that's, you know, you wouldn't be in business if you're not. So
no.
That's no use to me. You know, show a little bit of who you are. And I guess we're actually touching on something here whereby people sometimes actually need to take that little step back on a wider scale and think, all right, well, who are they? You know, what is different about them? You know, saying I do such and such and I'm really good at it. I don't think that's good enough anymore. I think it's, you know, it's a given that you're going to be good at it. So what is interesting about you? What makes you you? What is that USP? What is that unique thing about you, and why people are going to want to get to know you? It's not about whether or not they're going to want to work with you at this point. That's further down the line. What makes them think they want to get to know you? And that's all I do really when I'm approaching a pitch, is thinking, quite a lot of people seem to like me. So I must have something that some people think, oh, I quite like James. So I go into a pitch just thinking, I'd like people to sort of understand a little bit of what I do, but they don't need to know the full thing. They just need to know something to do with podcasts and brands and B2B podcasting. That's it. I don't need to go into details of what the services are, how I do it, and all that kind of stuff. I'll try and make people smile, and that might be I'll refer to something that someone else has said and take the mickey out of myself, or poke a little bit of fun at something and just make people smile, and they think, okay, so that's James, he does podcasting and he's a bit different, he likes to make people smile, or he likes to try and kind of take the mick out of himself or something. And I'm like, that's just how I want to portray myself, and
that's your personal brand. And that's the thing.
That's why this is, I think it is just a minute, but it's way more than that. And I think, if you really struggle with kind of thinking, what am I going to do in a 60-second pitch? Well, all right, you need to go back a few steps and sit down and just think, who actually am I? Who am I trying to be? What do I want people to think of when they think of me? What impression do I want to leave people with, whether it's seeing a post on LinkedIn, or whether it's going on my website, or whether it's a 1-minute pitch at the start of a networking meeting? Because it's all the same thing, really.
And actually, on that exact topic, if you were going to do any other marketing campaign, the first thing you do is you think about your target audience. You think about who is it that this is relevant to, and what kind of tone of voice and what kind of messaging should I be putting out there. So it's the same in a networking meeting, who are the people around the table? What do I want from the people around the table? And how do I need to come across to those people? So the easiest way to do that is to just show people how you help people. And I've emphasized the word you because I could line 5 or 6 people up against this wall who all do podcasting as a business. But what is it that you do that's different to them? Because you will all come at it in a different way. You will all have a different set of values. You'll all have a different set of clients that you like to work with, and you'll all come at it and from a very different perspective. You're not all going to be the same. You might overlap in a lot of places, but you won't be the same. So being able to get that across in your pitch is also quite important, I think. I want to know how you help people, not how everyone in your industry helps people, but what's special about you? What do you do? What do you bring to the table?
I'm smirking because sometimes I quite like swearing in a pitch because I think it sets your stall out quite like, oh, he's pretty down to earth, and you know what you're going to get. Some people go really deep into this, and I've been to like a couple of presentations before where people have spoke at length about what they think makes the perfect pitch, and almost, I think they describe it as a formula. To me, it feels a little bit more like a mathematical equation where they kind of go, right, first you've got to do this and you've got to do that, and then you've got to do that, and they're like the 6 elements or whatever it is that they say you've got to fit in, and then do all that in 60 seconds. I don't know if I'm a massive fan of that as such. I think structure is definitely important. As with any story, there's a beginning, there's a middle, there's an end. And if any of those are really poor, then it kind of lets down the rest of it. So, how you start, what your opening line is, telling, I'm such and such and I run a business called such and such and it does this. Well, that's all right. But, for me, it's like, I'm James and I help people grow their business with their voice. Something like that is be like, oh, right, okay. So just something that catches people's attention a little bit more. The middle bit, the kind of the meat in the sandwich or the filling in the sandwich, whatever it is. And then kind of neatly wrapping up at the end rather than just going, right, that I think I'm done. Yeah. Again, all adds to it. But I'm not sold on the concept of going really deep into, you've got to mention one case study and you've got to mention this and you've got to mention the other, because then it goes back to, I think, feeling a little bit clinical, a bit salesy for me. What's your perspective on this? Do you think there is a magic formula beyond just having a bit of structure, or are you a little bit more towards the side of thinking, well, actually, yes, there kind of is a magic equation for this?
I think you can overcomplicate this a little bit sometimes. And, some people really like structure. And if that floats your boat, then go down the structured route. Because if that is what you're comfortable doing and you feel confident doing that, then that's what you should do. If that fits with your personal brand, that fits with your personality, then, crack on, do it the way you want to do it. I think a framework is probably the best way to describe it.
Good phrase.
Yeah.
Like that.
I think there are key elements that need to be in there. It's up to you in what order you put them in. But I would argue there are certain things at certain points that add value. So,
what are those elements?
So I think the first thing to do when deciding on a pitch is you've got to remember why. This is the thing for me. Before I do anything, I always sit down and write why. Why are we here? What are we doing? What's the point of this? What do I want to get from it? So why are you doing a pitch? Well, you're doing it because you want to be able to introduce yourself so that people know who you are. You want to be seen. You want to be able to instigate further conversation, ultimately. That's what you want to get out of this. You're not going to sell stuff in 1 minute. What you want to do is basically, have a few people in the room who, kind of look up and go, you're interesting. I'd like to know a bit more about what you do. Or I'd like to know about you as the human. Or whatever it is, because actually sometimes it's the human element that makes a lot of people look up, to be honest, so something about you might be the thing that they're interested in, not necessarily a business, because we're not always going to be each other's target audience. These people might just be people who can potentially introduce you in the future. So what you're trying to do here is instigate further conversation and show your value. That's what you're trying to do. So in terms of a structure then, you've obviously got to introduce yourself. So you need to say who you are. I'm Nicky. It's up to you how you use that first line. Some people might use that first line as their introduction. They might actually say, I'm Nicky and I help people do, or I help people achieve, or I save people this, or whatever it is. That might be your opening line. And that might be enough for most people to go to sort of just, stop doodling on the pad and look up. Other people might use that first line to ask a question or, about something that, is relevant. Or you might have been on the way to your meeting and heard something on the radio about a statistic that you thought, actually, that's quite an interesting statistic. So, or it might be, did you know that 80% of people have this problem, and I solve it or whatever. It's entirely up to you how you start it. But you do need to start that first line with some confidence, because like I said, people are dealing on the pads, they need to look up. So, think about how you do that, but make sure you do introduce yourself, whether that's the second line or the first line. It's up to you. You might just start with did you know? And I'm Nicky and I help people do. So, but make sure that you're focusing. Using those words can be really useful, because rather than me just saying, hi, I'm Nicky and I run a networking community, for most people, it's like, it doesn't really inspire people particularly. They just be like, if I say, hi, I'm Nicky and I inspire growth-minded people to work together and support each other's success, you might actually go, okay, how does she do that then? So think about what that first line is. It might be, I'm Nicky and last week I saved 3 people 500 quid. That might be what you do. Last week I helped 5 people through the most difficult period of their life. Last week I helped 5 people achieve this amount of success, whatever it is. Think about how you can show how you help people. What is your value? That's, if you can get that in the first part of your pitch somewhere, then people are going to look up and take notice.
Yeah.
And you need to make sure at the end of your pitch that you reiterate that. So don't just go, that's it at the end. Finish it. Even if you, some people like to have a nice little tagline and, a little cute thing that's always about them. And that's kind of nice if that's what you want to do. If that fits with your personality or your brand, then do that. That's, have a little rhyme at the end or whatever it is. I tend to finish with mine with just like, I'm Nicky Thomas, I'm founder of the Growth Community, and we're all about working together. That's my end. It gives me an end that I know I finished my pitch, if you know what I mean. I don't have to do it, but it's something I tend to do. You don't have to, but always end at least with, I'm Nicky Thomas. I'd love a one-to-one with anyone in the room if you'd like to talk to me or whatever it is, but just do something that feels like you've said your name again. Because if I missed it at the beginning and I didn't write it down, I didn't know who you were. So always end with your name again. It just sort of helps with that. In terms of the rest of the framework, It's really up to you what you want to do here. You can talk about what you do. You can talk about how you recently helped somebody. You can talk about your pain points that you help people with. You can talk about what services you offer, but just be mindful of the fact that most people probably aren't going to grasp that. So personally, I come from a marketing background. I love stories.
Yep.
I think if you can tell a story, it's interesting. People resonate with it. They learn a lot from it. You can put a lot into a story if you're clever. And also when you're telling a story about how you help save people, you come across as your authentic self. You come across passionate about what you do. We see the care that you have for the people that you help. And we really see you because you can talk about that without writing it down because you totally know it. You can tell that story and you can say it from the heart. And I do genuinely think that if you can turn your pitch into a story, it has a massive impact.
Once upon a time, we talked about like customer journey, didn't we? And that was kind of the way that we sort of talked about probably more like a longer presentation, but a little bit like, here's someone that I helped last week. That's a story. If you can kind of like, this was their problem. This is what they were really struggling with. This is what we did. And this is how it's helped them. And that's great. Here's a question. So 2 ends of the scale. One end of the scale is you craft what you think is a really great pitch and you use it every time. The other end of the scale is you do something completely different every week, every fortnight, whenever you are at a networking thing. Where do you sit on that? Is there a right or a wrong? Because you mentioned you come from a marketing background. I also dabbled in the marketing world quite a bit. And with some stuff, this idea of repetition, how many times someone has to hear something before they actually take notice of it is one thing. The other end of the scale is that, gets a bit boring if you're just, a bit lazy, just using the same thing every time.
So I think a happy medium in there is important. I think if you can get a structure that frames your pitch that perhaps is more static. So quite often I'll say to people, nail down your opening lines. So perhaps you always say, I'm Nicky Thomas and I help people buy.
Yep.
That might be your thing. You nail that down. And if you can get emotions in there or something, or things, the buzzwords in there that people take notice of, like, saving money, saving time, holding people's hands through a difficult thing, whatever it is. If you can get words like that into your static elevator pitch, I guess, because your elevator pitch is like a few seconds. If you can kind of get that and you get your ending with a bit of a structure, then that gives you something that stays consistent. It feels like it's part of your brand and it's quite clear. But what you put in the middle of that, you can flex that as much as you want, I think.
We're building a sandwich, aren't we, here?
Yeah.
But I think filling you can play around with.
Yes.
But the beginning and the end, just get that right and just reuse it.
Yeah.
I agree with that. And I think people worry about, I've got to change it every time. I've got to do this differently every time.
No, I don't think you do.
I always use the example. I might have used this before on this podcast. I've definitely used it on other podcasts before, of Chris Tarrant on Who Wants to Be a Millionaire. Start of every show, after every break, he would go 15 questions, 3 lifelines, £1 million every single time. And no one ever sent a complaint in saying, could he not find some slightly different ways to say that? Yeah, that was just the way that he did it. I've not watched it for years. I don't even know who presents it. Is it still Jeremy Clarkson that presents it now?
I have no idea.
But, in its heyday, it was built on this idea of simplicity, repetition. And no one was angry about that. So it's, get something right. If you hit upon the right formula, you can just rinse and repeat it. You can't use the same questions on Who Wants to Be a Millionaire. That'll get really boring. The questions have to be different.
Yeah.
But, kind of like the stuff that goes around it, how they get into those questions, just the same every time. But it was perfect.
Yeah.
Why change it?
Yeah, and
that's what we're aiming for, isn't it?
And that's the brand, isn't it? That's what we recognise, and that's what branding is about. It's about recognising something and trusting it. So if you can create that frame, then it will help. It will also help you to know what you're doing, particularly if you're nervous as well. And then it's up to you what you put in the middle. I like a story. I always say, when we grew up, we learnt by stories. That is something that we did. We resonate with stories. We take the information in better from a story. If you give me a list of, hi, this is what I do, and I work with these people, and these are the kind of things we do, it doesn't really do very much for my brain. But if you tell me a story about somebody and it has a beginning, a middle, and an end, and you can actually squash quite a lot into this, and you can tell me, so you might use a line like, well, how, or does this ever happen to you? Or, some people we come across people all the time who've got this problem. That's a great way to go from, hi, I'm Nicky and I help people do you ever have this problem? Or 15% of people have this problem. Or you can go into that pain point in lots of different ways, use lots of different types of language to it, but then take me into the pain point. Yeah. Did you know that 85% of people who complain when they were asked for feedback about their conveyancer, they complained that they never talk to them, their communication was awful, they never knew what was going on. Well, I recently worked with Joe and Carl, and they've just bought their house, and it was a really difficult thing. We did this, we did that, we helped them with this, we communicated with them every single week, we made sure that we knew where everything was going on with the chain, we did this, we did that, we were ahead of the game with everything, we even helped out some of the conveyancers along the way. They were happy, this is what they said, here's some feedback. Now you may not be able to use a real example unless you've got permission to do that, in which case put a few different people together and make, your perfect avatar kind of customer. Yeah. But in that story, which because you know to write it down because you know it, you've told us the kind of people you might work with, what's going wrong for them, or what their problem was. You've told us what you personally did, how it worked, what it was like to work with you during that period of time, what the outcome was, and how happy they were. And at the end of it, I go, actually, in a minute, I've learned a lot about you. I've seen you talk from the heart about how much you care about the fact that you communicate with your customers and how important that part of your service is. Yeah. You've told us what is important to you so we can see what you believe in. So in a minute, you've given me a lot. And then, when that reticular activating part of my brain, that subconscious thing, pulls that to the front, and I hear someone saying, oh God, we've got this conveyancer, we're thinking about selling our house and we're dreading it. Then you can go, actually, you know what? I know Rebecca, she's been telling me about how brilliant she is at communicating with her people and what fantastic feedback she gets. Would you like me to introduce her to you? Because you certainly sound like the kind of person that she likes to work with. Yeah. So in 1 minute, you've told us an awful lot about you, not just a list of services. We've seen you, like genuinely seen you. We've seen what you care about. We've seen how you help people. We've seen the kind of people you actually help. And you've given us a lot to go on to walk away from there. Yeah. And I've got an idea of your personality and your value system. So actually, quite often, that is the thing that makes me go, I really fancy a coffee with them.
Yeah.
I'm not buying a house. I'm not ready to, I don't need a conveyancer, but actually, I think there's some synergy there for us as humans. Let's go and have a coffee.
Yeah. And the thing is, you don't need to put a day aside to sit down and come up with this. There's a pretty good chance, actually, that you've already got the material. So, have a look back at whenever I'm thinking, what do I want to talk about in the meeting tomorrow? I just have a look what I've posted about on LinkedIn in the last week. Because even if it's just a client that I've worked with, I quite like doing, this week I've done proposals for a solicitor, an accountant, and a solopreneur who's starting a well-being business.
Yeah, that's a good one.
And I'm like, there'd all be completely different podcasts if they happen, but that's the point. And it's just a way of kind of, a different way of illustrating who you are, what you do. But go back through your posts. What have you blogged about? Who have you met up with for coffee this week? What events have you been to? And there'll be a way of kind of, taking that and turning it into something. I'm aware time-wise we've not got a lot left. There's one other thing that I want to ask you about. Just one other very quick tip that I just want to mention, though, which is if you go somewhere and they say it's 60 seconds, keep it to 6 seconds. Because if you're 2.5 minutes later still talking about what you do, it doesn't matter how great you are. At that point, I'm thinking you're unreliable, you can't follow instructions, and all manner of other quite negative things because of the fact that you've just gone way over and you're just rambling about how great you are. Don't do that.
Yeah, that time hoggers.
Yes.
It just makes people... it's not fair and equitable for the rest of the room, is it?
No, and that's why prep is king on this, isn't it? This is a little bit of a curveball thing, but I think it's something that's just worth mentioning. Do you think there'll ever be an alternative to this? So I'm aware that, there may be people, because of, neuro differences or for whatever reason, that maybe feel a little bit excluded from networking because it's something that they just can't do. That idea of having to stand up in front of the room or whatever it might be, or the other alternative like open networking, they find quite intimidating for whatever reason. Do you think that there'll ever be like something else that we do instead of a pitch?
Well, at the end of the day, the whole point of networking is for humans to connect with each other. So, it's entirely up to you how you use your 60 seconds or whatever it is, 30 seconds or whatever it is. It's up to you what you do with that. And if you don't feel comfortable doing a pitch, then, don't do whatever feels comfortable for you. And, I think, if you just want to say, hi, actually, I find doing a pitch quite difficult. I just want you to know that I'm a nice person. I love having conversations with people and finding out how I can help them. If you're open to doing that, then let's do it.
Yeah.
And I wonder actually whether you might get more conversations from that.
I wouldn't be outraged, if someone said, I'm really bad at doing this, so I've just printed off a little A5 flyer for everyone that just explains who I am and pass it round. I wouldn't be outraged at that. I'd kind of think, fair dues, that's, you found a problem and it's your own problem and you found a solution for it. That's actually a really positive thing to do. Or something else where, someone... it'd be quite hard to do this, but someone that says, like, actually, I've just done like a 30-second video. I'd like to give you all the QR code for it. That'd be quite hard to do, actually. I can't figure out how you do that in a room. But maybe, you pass out something, you get little cards done that's got a QR code on it that you said, I'm quite nervous about doing it. So I've pre-recorded my pitch. I'm going to give you a card that's got it on. I'd be like, that's kind of quite ingenious if you realise...
I think it would actually work quite well, to be honest. And also, I'm not going to talk on behalf of every other networking organizer in the world, but if someone came to me and said, if I sent you my pitch as a video, could you play it instead? And it wasn't like going to be a load of work for us. I would do that. I would speak to the group leader and we'd arrange it. I mean, I've got meetings where if people can't attend, they put their pitch in the WhatsApp group and the group plug it in to their computer and they actually show it on the screen.
Love that.
So, it's horses for courses. You've got to be you. At the end of the day, networking is about humans interacting with humans. So you need to be your most authentic self, and you shouldn't be afraid to do that. And there might be some people who don't like it, but they're not your humans. They're not your tribe. So don't worry about it. Always just concentrate on the people who are your tribe. You won't be liked by everybody.
Yeah,
and you just need to accept that.
Amen. Gosh, we've covered a lot in there.
Haven't we?
We always end with homework.
We do.
What are you setting people for homework on this?
So homework then is to go away and actually play around with the sentence, I am, insert name. How do you help people? Think about how you help people. Not what you do. How do you help people? What do you do? How do they feel when they have worked with you? Get that nailed down. And then try and create that into some sort of framework that you can use as your opener or your second part of your pitch or whatever. But that bit that actually says how you help people. Write down after that your top 5 pain points, because you should be able to work that out. That gives you a choice of a few different pain points to zhuzh around in your pitch when you see fit, or it might be relevant, or it might be one of those days of the year or something that's relevant or whatever. So you can pick your pain point that matches that, and then think about some of the ways you could show how you actually help people. So think about do you have some case studies that you have permission to use for real, and you can use testimonial with it. If you don't, maybe look at those pain points and create like the little avatar type scenarios and just write it all down. It will really help you focus on what you want to get across in your pitch. And if you've got time as well, think about who your target audience is. Think about who you want to get to, and think about what you need to say to that target audience. So, think about those pain points. Think about the people who are experiencing it. What do they want to hear? What do they want to know about you? What's going to make their life better? Put yourself in that, that saving the hero kind of like scenario, that story. If you can think about it, think about your client is having a problem. How do you solve it? So if you can write all that down and turn that into your pitch, you've got one hell of a pitch in 1 minute. And practice it and try it out. And if you're part of a group, ask them for some feedback.
Amen. Brilliant. It's been a pleasure. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Well, thank you for your attendance today. I hope you've learned something new. Every day is a business school day after all. If you'd like to contact us or perhaps put yourself forward as a future guest, find either Nicky or myself on LinkedIn, or you can drop us a line using the links in the show notes. Right, school is out. Please wait for the bell before you leave.